Um, Hello everyone, I want to welcome you. My name is Raymond. I'm here to talk about Divinity PP3, and particularly today I want us to give attention to the outbreak of what we call the Wangereza Wafaransa Wars, or what is commonly known as the political religious wars in what? In Uganda. In Uganda. Now, many of us have heard about what we call the religious wars in Uganda, only that at this level of advanced level, more so in CRE, in Divinity, we need to give it our best. We need to give it our maturity, such that this time around we know how to deliver these facts very well. What were these religious wars? Maybe before we define the religious wars, I just wanted to give you a very small reminder about the history of religions in Uganda. Number one, traditionally, the people of Uganda believed in a traditional religion. We can call this the religion of the traditionalists, or what is famously known as the Lubale religion, Lubaleism. People in Uganda from the beginning believed in ancestral spirits. Jaja Mukasa, Jaja Dungu, Jaja Chiwanuka. These ones were believed to be the gods of Uganda, the small gods. There is offered sacrifices. In our section A, I believe we have already talked about the origin of the African traditional religion. Now, around 1844, as a result of the long-distance trade, your O-level history, when we talk about the long-distance trade, you know that traders moved from the coast to the interior. Now, in 1844, the first Muslim Arabs arrived in Uganda, and they were in position to introduce Islam in Uganda. This means, therefore, a section of some Baganda became Muslims around 1844. However, today we are going to talk about the year 1875. Two European explorers who were H.M. Stanley and John Hanning Speke managed to visit Kabaka Mutesa. And when they visited Kabaka Mutesa of Uganda, they managed to convince him to invite the Christian missionaries. So, in 1877, the Church Missionary Society, which was a group of Protestants, sent its missionaries, such as Reverend C.T. Wilson and Alexander Mackay, you see. And this was the beginning of what we call the Protestant faith. Now, later on, in 1878, the Roman Catholic Society, who were now Catholics, managed to send two missionaries who were Father Simeon Laudel, or whom the Baganda termed as Laudel Mapera, and Brother Amans. It is funny that these people arrived in Uganda on the 17th of February 1879. That is why when the Catholics are singing during their time of worship, they will talk about Twebaza Mapera Nemone Amansi Abasale Bafe Abalete Dinye Babaga Baga. Then they continue. Kumina Musambo February omwezi lukumi lunana nsambo mwenda. You see, they're trying to recall history that was made on the 17th of February 1879 that welcomed what we call the Catholics to what? To Uganda. Now, this is it. When the four religions now started operating within Uganda, it became inevitable. It became very obvious that they had to do what? They had to clash with one another. So, religious wars were unhealthy competition, rivalry, and mistrust in Uganda amongst the Catholics, the Protestants, the Muslims, and the traditionalists. These wars are also sometimes called religious confusion. They are also called religious conflicts at the county and in the palace. They were quite heavy and unhealthy because they involved quite a lot. At times we end up calling them the Wangereza Wafaransa wars. Now, before you there, some of you have that handout that you received during the lockdown. The religious wars and the causes. I want us to hit two birds, but with one stone. And we place before us a question which reads, to what extent was Kabaka Mwanga responsible for the outbreak of the religious wars in Uganda? To what extent was Kabaka Mwanga responsible for the outbreak of religious wars in Uganda? Now, one thing that I want you to understand is we have already said in 1875, it is Kabaka Mutesa the first that wrote a letter inviting the Christian missionaries to Uganda. And we have seen that this letter was responded to after 2 years in 1877 when the Church Missionary Society missionaries arrived. Then we have talked about 1879 when the Roman Catholics also arrived in Uganda. One other episode, one other event that I want all of us to understand is the year 1884. In 1884, Kabaka Mutesa died. And now his son, who later on came to be known as Daniel Basamulekere, Chirevuntende Mwanga, but whom we can call Kabaka Mwanga, took on the throne. But from around 1884, 85, we see that the religious wars became very escalated, very boiled, very intense. Now the question we have before us is saying, to what extent was Kabaka Mwanga responsible for the outbreak of the religious wars in Uganda? This means we're supposed to have an introduction, which introduction we already have, that these were unhealthy competitions, unhealthy rivalry amongst the different religious groups in what? In Uganda. They were also known as the Wangereza Wafaransa wars, and so on and so forth. Now, it is very important that we know that to a larger extent. That's why on your screen there you have that to a larger extent, Kabaka Mwanga was responsible for the outbreak of the religious wars in Uganda. One, why? Kabaka Mwanga was young and inexperienced, who could not handle well the issues at the time, hence leading to the outbreak of the religious what? Religious wars. Why are we blaming Kabaka Mwanga? Kabaka Mwanga was very young. He rose to the throne at the age of around 17 years. We all know how 17-year-old youth behave with a lot of adolescence. Adolescence is at its peak. Besides that, Kabaka Mwanga had not had a chance to be a leader before. He was simply picked as a son, and a son of the deceased Kabaka Mutesa, and he became king, just like that. Therefore, his lack of experience subjected Uganda to the outbreak of religious what? Religious wars. Then apart from that, Kabaka Mwanga was inconsistent in that he was not clear on which religion. He could become a Catholic, Protestant, and the next day he was a Muslim. This led to the confusion, hence leading to the outbreak of religious what? Religious wars. Some of us who have done history, we know about the history of that great leader of France known as Louis the 16th. Why was he responsible for the outbreak of the French Revolution of 1789? They say the character of King Louis the 16th, that Kabaka Mwanga showed a weakness of being inconsistent. Today he would be pronounced that he was a Muslim. The other day he would be a Catholic. The other day he would be a Protestant. This kind of shifting of goalposts made him to look very inconsistent, and it ended up confusing the followers. It ended up confusing the younger men and women in Uganda, leading to the outbreak of religious what? Religious wars. Then Mwanga ordered for the killing of Bishop Hannington in Busoga, which annoyed the missionaries. Hence, the religious wars. The Protestants, Catholics, and the Protestants wanted to get rid of him. He hated them, leading to the religious what? Religious wars. When we look at that year, 1885, that man called Bishop Hannington, while he was on his way to Uganda, this was a bishop of the Church Missionary Society, right? At the level of a bishop, someone is a great leader in as far as the Protestant or Catholic Church is concerned. However, acting on Kabaka Mwanga's orders, Hannington was killed, and this was a direct message to the Christians that Kabaka Mwanga never needed them at all. That's why when you look at the course of the religious wars, we look at the Christians at a certain level teaming up, the Protestants and the Catholics joining hands with the Muslims to overthrow what? To overthrow Kabaka Mwanga. Baganda overthrowing their own king. Why? Because he had painted it in black and white that he didn't want anything to do with a religion. Then the other thing was Mwanga expected guns from the new religion. Very true and very, 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 very vital for us to talk about is that there was always an expectation of the African leaders that the newcomers, the missionaries, the whites, would come with military assistance. Mwanga by then had a very big enemy, being Bunyoro. Now, Bunyoro, being a threat to Uganda, Kabaka Mwanga expected to be supported by the missionaries, but they did not. This made him to act otherwise against them. Kabaka Mwanga also ordered for the killing of the Uganda martyrs, which brought him into conflicts with the what? With the Christian missionaries. Ladies and gentlemen, on the 3rd of June, 1886, at Namugongo, in order for Mwanga to reassert his position, Namugongo, Kabaka Mwanga ordered for the killing of nearly about 32 early converts. At first, they were not known as Uganda martyrs. They were known as early converts. At Namugongo, they were burnt simply because they refused to do what? They refused to denounce the new faith. This earned Mwanga a lot of enmity. Kabaka Mwanga was also a dictator, and when the missionaries opposed him, it resulted into religious what? Religious wars. You see, in Uganda, the Kabaka's word was always final. The Kabaka was always having what we call absolute what? Absolute powers. This therefore forced or made Kabaka to enter into a very bitter conflict. Mwanga desired to protect the political independence of Buganda. The Arabs who had been in Uganda for a long time warned Kabaka Mwanga that his father had made a mistake of welcoming the Christian missionaries. Because literally, the coming of the whites meant Buganda's independence was soon going to be lost. Now, Kabaka Mwanga wanted to preserve the traditional, the independence of Buganda, which of course the missionaries did not want to see. Away from that, Mwanga also wanted to protect the traditional norms and culture of Buganda, which brought him into conflicts with the whites. Kabaka Mwanga, as a nationalist, as a traditionalist, greatly loved his culture, his norms. In Buganda, the Kabaka is the custodian of values, of practices, of the Chiganda culture. Therefore, he didn't want to be at the forefront of the erosion of the Chiganda culture. He wanted to preserve it. Remember when the missionaries came, they started conflicting with many of the African practices. Where Africans practiced polytheism, the belief in many gods, missionaries came and said, no, monotheism, belief in one God. This brought them into a bitter conflict. Apart from that, the Baganda practiced polygamy. When the missionaries came up, they started talking about monogamy. These practices brought about conflicts. Apart from that, Kabaka Mwanga ordered for the expulsion of all foreigners from Uganda. It was Kabaka Mwanga, after seeing that the missionaries were going to spoil his kingdom, he thought of a plan of expelling all foreigners from his religion, from his region, or from his territory. Something that brought him a lot of trouble with the missionaries. Mwanga aborted plans also, or to abandon the missionaries on the island of Lake Victoria. There was a plan by Kabaka Mwanga to get all people who had refused to denounce the new faith, get them, go and dump them on an island in Lake Victoria in the middle there, meaning that they would eventually starve to death. Kabaka Mwanga's plan, however, did not succeed. Kabaka Mwanga blamed the missionaries for mysterious fire that caught the granary or the food store, hence leading to the religious wars. He further blamed the missionaries for the death of his mother, that is the Namasole, which also led to the conflict. Then the he overbelieved the Muslims, who told him that missionaries were agents of the Europeans. You see, Kabaka Mwanga has a very big hand in the outbreak of the religious wars, but however, to a smaller extent, there were also other factors. Yes, the desire for the religious denomination to win, and I mean the desire by the various religious denominations to win many converts. Each religion wanted to have as many converts as possible. You see now, each religion was fighting to make sure that they win as many converts as possible. You could relate this with the current trend. When you are seated on your TV, this minute, MTN is saying everywhere you go. After a few seconds, Airtel is also saying the smartphone network. Then Africell is saying don't be cheated. Who is cheating who? There is that competition. These telecom companies, each of them wants to win very many converts. So Mwanga, yes, was to blame, but the fact that each religion also wanted to win very many converts brought about religious wars in Uganda. Each religious group also wanted to win the favors of the Kabaka. There is a common practice, I beg your pardon, at people's places of work. even at home. People will always spread rumors against others. Why? Because they want someone to be hated by the boss, and then another person to be loved by the boss. Someone reports about even a very minor aspect that occurred when the boss was away. Why? Because that person wants to win the favor of the boss. We are saying today, religious wars occurred, not necessarily because of Kabaka Mwanga, but because each religion wanted to win the favor of the Kabaka. It was a swagalific for your religion to be called the king is what? The king is religion. Away from that, the influence of the Arab Muslims in Uganda brought about confusion because they kept on exerting pressure on Kabaka Mwanga to expel. The missionaries found a very big problem in Uganda, that the Muslims or the Arabs had lived in Uganda for some time before. Therefore, by the time they came in, by the time the missionaries came in, the Muslims or the Arabs were already having a very big influence at the Kabaka's court. These always kept on advising the king on what had to be done. Then the role played by the traditionalists, who also criticized Christianity for undermining the African values. The African traditional religion in Uganda, the Ruralism, also had to raise their concern. Why? Because the Christian missionaries always termed their religion as satanic, as being evil. Every time they conflicted with the African traditional religion. So this brought about confusion. The traditionalists got united and made up a decision that this had to come to an end. Then we are saying the mother countries like Britain and France had long-term differences. You see, both Catholicism and Protestantism were brought by mother countries. Catholicism was fronted by France. That's why we're talking about Ufaransa. While Protestantism was fronted by Britain. Now, here we are seeing that indeed France and Britain came to Uganda while they were already enemies back home. Therefore, their long-standing enmity back home in Europe is what was extended to Uganda. So Kabaka Mwanga can be excused for that matter. Then we cannot forget to talk about the untimely death of Kabaka Mutesa the first. He who died in 1884, leaving behind a power vacuum. It was not Kabaka Mwanga's own making, but it was God's own making. Each religion wanted to have political domination, or we can say each religion wanted to dominate the other politically. Each religion wanted to win very many political offices. If you want, you can put it that way. Therefore, each of them wanted to be the Katikiro, they wanted to be the Mulamuzi, they wanted to be the Mwanika, so as to have influence over other religions. This, of course, did not spare Uganda. Uganda went ahead and experienced the religious wars. We are talking about the involvement of Captain Frederick Lugadi, Captain F.D. Lugadi, Captain Frederick Diltry Lugadi. Captain Lugadi was sent to Uganda as a representative of the Imperial British East African Company in 1890. Having been a Protestant, when he reached in Uganda, Captain Lugadi, whom the Baganda later on termed as Kapere Lugadi, sided with the Protestants. he offered them how many? He offered them 500 what? 500 guns. Meaning that Lugadi came up with a side. Lugadi now is no longer neutral. One group of the religions has been armed with 500 guns. That's why we are talking about the involvement of Captain Lugadi. Then the religious disagreements among the various pages in the Kabaka's court. When we look at the pegs, people are used to what we call the peg boys. At the Kabaka's court, Kabaka always has those young boys that we call the pegs, who are always in the palace to serve the king. These ones got disagreements because some of them became Catholics, others became Protestants. So we are saying here that the disagreements among the different pegs at the Kabaka's court brought about religious because they started questioning the authority of the king, which forced him to kill them. When you look at Christianity, when you look at the Catholics and the Protestants, within the Bible, they learned that Jesus Christ was the King of kings. And that the number one person who had to be praised and worshipped was none other than Jesus and God, not the Kabaka. So somehow, somewhere, they started having conflicting loyalty. Should we follow our king or should we follow the king found in the Bible? They became very inconsistent in the way they were doing things. This landed them into problems. The Islamization policy in Uganda, where the Muslims forced Christians to join Islam by destroying churches and killing those who refused, annoyed the missionaries, forcing them to fight the Muslims. There was a time when the Muslims or the Islamic religion was the most powerful religion within Uganda. Why? Because they had been in Uganda for quite a long time. They had a lot of influence. Therefore, there was a move to force everyone to become a Muslim. Missionaries had to fight off this, and this led to the outbreak of religious wars. It's also believed that the Muslims fueled the conflicts because they wanted to create market for their guns. Then Uganda's traditional belief that the foreigners from the east would come and take away their independence also caused the religious wars. Religious wars were further escalated or increased by what we call rumors. Members, the outbreak of religious wars in Uganda is something that was broad, that we need to give a lot of attention to. It had what we call a course, just like it is displayed on your screen there. We're talking about the first missionary groups to arrive, coming in 1877. These were none other than the Protestants. Then in 1879, the Catholics came. Then this brought about conflicts now for converts, each group wanting to win very many converts. And of course, this was the situation until in 1884 when Kabaka Mutesa I died. As we said, his son Mwanga had to take over at the age of around 17 to 18. Mwanga lacked experience, and therefore the following year in 1885, Kabaka Mwanga ordered for the killing of what? For the killing of Bishop Hannington while on his way coming to Uganda. This was later followed by the ordering for the killing of the Uganda martyrs. Martyrs such as Joseph Balikudende, excuse me, such as Matia Murumba, and quite very many others. Events kept on unfolding until in 1900, like you're seeing, uh, the Uganda agreement had to be signed. I will also encourage you, maybe in our next handling, we shall try at length to talk about the outcomes of the what? Of the religious wars, the outcome, both the positive and the negative, because the religious wars in Uganda brought about both bad things and good things. I should appreciate and I should say thank you so much for being a very, 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 very outstanding audience. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for tuning in. I encourage you to always keep updated such that at the end of the day we can do some continuation of our reading. God bless.